Hello and welcome to the Grand Line Review, your source for everything One Piece. Today we have a manga review of chapter 878, Mink Tribe Guardian Chief Pedro, and it is an absolute treat, so let's crack into it. So we begin with a rather painful reminder of the events of last chapter. In a flashback we have a conversation between Pedro and Perospero that occurred just after Big Mom took 50 years of Pedro's life. And even though this had already been revealed, it was a good reminder that Pedro was, in effect, 82 years old in present day. So good God, he was spry for such an old cat, but I guess that may also be because he's only mentally 32. It really is a tragedy when I think about it. However, Pedro decided to make the most of the situation and use what little was left of his actual life for something he actually believed in. And from this point on in the series, I think we really need to remember that half of the Straw Hats, including Luffy, simply would have died here and there if it wasn't for Pedro. So his decision of when and where to sacrifice himself was massive. So Perospero and Pedro talk a little bit about the Nox pirates while their ship is being towed out of Totland, resulting in a flashback within a flashback of a very young Pedro who looks absolutely adorable, and he is meeting none other than Gol D. Roger. Tiny Pedro begs Roger and the unseen Kozuki Oden to let him come on their journey, which reminds me a lot of a young Luffy begging to join the Red Hair Pirates. And Roger had some rather choice words for Pedro, telling him that he is on standby for now, and that sooner or later, everybody gets their chance to shine. And I love that these words end up being repeated by Pedro to a young Carrot later in the chapter, making her yet another character indirectly inheriting the will of the Pirate King. And just while we're here, I think it's worth noting that Oda still hasn't chosen to show us anything of Kozuki Oden. We didn't even get a hint of a silhouette, just the mention of his name. So either Oda may have learned his lesson about drawing silhouettes that become drastically different, or he's saving this particular reveal for a very specific point in the story. So my theory is, given how most of the Wano samurai have turned out so far, I wouldn't be surprised if Oden had a really weird and out there character design like Raizo or Kanjuro, making a silhouette a bit difficult to do without giving the whole thing away. But whatever the case, seeing his name appear here is a nice reminder that the Wano arc is drawing ever closer, and I've got some pretty serious hype building for that. But back to this chapter, I find it interesting that it was named after Pedro, given that the man of the hour is undoubtedly Monkey D. Luffy. He owns this chapter in every single way, and I love it. Luffy getting serious isn't something that we get to see a lot of, except for just before he's about to down a villain. And it's great to see him take command, as a captain should. After seeing one of his comrades die, he spends no time in mourning and kicks his crew into gear to escape Whole Cake Island. He even finds a way to hold Katakuri at bay to allow the coup de burst to complete. It's sort of weird though, holding him in place with an elephant gun, but I guess it works. Remember that Katakuri is no longer a Logia user, as he was officially changed into a special Paramecia type. Exactly what that means isn't really known at this point, and it may never be known. It might just be an excuse for him exhibiting some Logia-like abilities earlier on, and he actually does so in this chapter again. But given that he isn't able to dissolve and become Mochi like a real Logia user would be able to do with their element, it does make a degree of sense, I guess, as to how Luffy is able to hold him at bay. And so Luffy's big plan is to throw Katakuri into the mirror world and face him there. This is a brilliant solution to not only Big Mom interrupting them, but to any of the Charlotte siblings or Big Mom pirates getting involved. Prior to this, I thought that Katakuri might get caught up in the coup de burst and end up facing Luffy in Chocolate Town, but this is so much cooler. It also results in one of the single most badass panels of modern One Piece, with Luffy smashing the mirror leading back to the Sunny. His confidence is infectious. Luffy believes that he can take Katakuri, so do I. It might not be an easy fight, but it is certainly doable for the future Pirate King. And I think this one-on-one fight is actually very necessary, because in the next arc, although we don't expect Luffy to take down Kaido in a traditional way, he still needs to face the Emperor. So to leave Whole Cake Island without taking out a commander wouldn't be the best build-up for that. And yes, I know he beat Cracker, but Nami was a huge part of that victory, so I'm not going to count it. It's also great that we're getting a sort of final boss fight in general. It gives us something that will no doubt be wildly entertaining while this whole baking a cake business is happening. I was worried that we might just see 5 to 10 more chapters of running, but this week has set up the conclusion of this arc amazingly. But it does raise the question as to how Luffy is going to get back to the Sunny post Katakuri. I might be wrong here, but I was under the impression that Brulee's mirror powers only encompassed Whole Cake Island and not the entirety of Totland. So no matter where Luffy pops up, he's still going to need to escape the island. And I think that might pave the way for some forgotten characters to have a bit more purpose in this arc. I'm thinking of 2 in particular, and the first of the Vinsmoke family. They'll be fighting their own battle right now. I mean, they have an entire kingdom to evacuate, but given that, it should take them quite some time, perhaps long enough for Luffy to beat Katakuri and come through a mirror onto their ships. They could then take him to Chocolate Town and assist with one final battle, getting that cake into Big Mom's mouth, and ta-da, everyone is free to go. The second character I'm thinking of, and I feel this is already much less likely, but Pound. The dude hasn't been seen at all since the first time we went into the Seducing Woods, and surely he has some part to play at some stage, otherwise why bother having him there at all? And even with all of that out of the way, I still feel like I've barely scratched the surface of this chapter. There are just so many little standout moments, one after the other. For example, Perospero is alive, and that was probably to be expected. The man can't be worth 700 million for nothing. It looks like the reason he survived was some sort of candy armor that the explosion broke through but wasn't strong enough to kill Perospero. And he did lose an arm, so he and Shanks now have something in common. Carrot also got some good action this chapter. After her own kind of cool mini flashback about Pedro, she charged straight at Katakuri, who overcame her entirely and easily, but it was nice to see that fierceness and willingness to jump into combat. I'm slowly, and I mean very slowly, becoming more and more sold on her travelling with the Straw Hats for a fair bit more time. Still hopefully not officially joining the crew, but let's be honest, if Oda wants to make her into a Straw Hat, he will make her awesome, like every Straw Hat before her. And speaking of future Straw Hats, Jinbei was great this chapter as well, mainly for comic value. I loved when he was on board the Sunny and just asking for jobs to do, trying to fit in as best he can as an actual crew member. And the final thing I'll make note of is Big Mom being shot in the mouth by the coup de burst after trying to eat the Sunny. That was amazingly satisfying to see. But in conclusion, this week was just a powerhouse of a chapter. I don't think there's a single flaw in terms of story, dialogue, or artwork, and it was just thrilling from beginning to end. After finishing it once, I immediately went back and started reading it again, and after that, I did it a third time. Which is great, because that's when I start to pick up on all the little details that I missed the first 2 times around with the sheer amount of craziness going on, like young Wanda talking to young Pedro in the flashback, or like how the cannonballs being fired from the Tart ships have faces and personalities of their own as they're being shot at the Sunny. It's just so cool. And to top it all off, One Piece also got the cover of Shonen Jump this week, and there's also a superb color spread that I've already said is one of my desktop backgrounds. Feel free to check those out yourselves. My words really will not do them justice. So everything about this week was fantastic. Love it. Looking forward to next week. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and feel free to like, favorite, or subscribe if you enjoyed this video. This has been the Grand Line Review, and I'll see you next time.